The following is a quick explanation of the nested dimensions of human connection and how that guides our understanding of and approach to conflict, excerpted from our Intro to Conflict Resilience information session. We use our map of the nested dimensions of human connection. All right, and that's just a lot of words to say that we've created a map to show the scale of human connection and the different ways that we co-create and how those interrelate together. This map is super useful for lots of reasons, and it also helps us see the patterns of the different possibilities that exist at each level. You might be wondering, Tamara, what are you talking about? What are these levels? Let's get into them and take them one by one.
I
All right,
was wondering that.
first, we've got that personal layer. And by this, we mean those individual beliefs, the way we embody those, and the way we act as individuals.
So in the context of conflict, this might be someone inside of a state of collapse or a state of trigger or inside of a trauma pattern that's making it hard for them to navigate their internal world in order to show up effectively to be able to collaborate.
So that's the personal layer. The next layer is the interpersonal level, which is where we start creating relationships between individuals.
And a conflict on this layer might be two people keep talking past one another, leaving themselves feeling misunderstood and unseen. Maybe somebody's a type A, maybe somebody's a type B. And it's just this personality and communication thing. It's really about the two of them figuring out how to work together.
Next up, we've got that organizational layer, which is where you have many individuals coming together, united with a common purpose. So basically a group of relationships that once they're together, create a whole new thing, right? With its own culture, structure, purpose, and more.
In an organization, for example, you might have unclear roles and unclear expectations. Maybe information is consolidated and inaccessible, and this is bringing people into relationships through those roles and expectations, and they're actually coming into friction because of those organizational features.
That one's always tricky. Then you've got the system level, right? Which is when many organizations solidify into a network that operates across an entire population.
And in conflict, this might look like a nonprofit experiencing scarcity of money because of the whole grant making system that they're inside of. So maybe a project manager and a fundraiser come into conflict all the time, but the conflict is actually about how the organization is embedded and related to the nonprofit industrial complex as a whole. It's a system dynamic that the people are experiencing.
And then the next layer is ideological, which is those commonly held beliefs and stories that we carry in our minds and bodies within a society.
A conflict might emerge because one person is consciously or unconsciously trying to embody the form of leadership that's valued by patriarchy and showing up inside of all of these kind of toxic masculine embodiments. And what's actually happening inside the organization is people are wrestling with this archetype that's now present in the organization. Sounds fun.
Right. And then you've got the next layer, right, which is the world, which is our beautiful earth, right? The rock that we're hurtling through space on. Gotta love her. And then all the beings living and otherwise on the planet and our physical realities.
So in conflicts, for example, maybe there's someone who is living inside of a very congested city when they don't have the access to nature that would help them support feeling connected and belonging inside themselves and regulate their nervous system. They're feeling this generalized anxiety and disconnection. And then as they bring that in to a relationship, maybe a relationship that's mediated through pixels and Zoom, they're navigating that whole thing. So it's not just about the way the two people are relating, it's also about the way that they're positioned on Earth and whether that sets them up to be able to relate to each other well.
Then you said generalized anxiety. I was like, oh, that's me. All right. So then you've got the all layer, where we're talking about spirit, ancestral, cosmological, energetic, archetypal realms, and more. Right? It's that space of I'm a Sagittarius and Simon is a Virgo, and sometimes my fire sign energy becomes really intense.
And that is a conflict, right? Fire, like the fire sign for earth sign. Or maybe, Mercury's always in retrograde. Or maybe there's kind of a generational and ancestral dynamic playing itself out. We navigate our different racial and ethnic heritages, and we're all inside of those stories. So sometimes it's actually like a white Jew, black woman thing going on.
And then our last layer, which is the source level, right? Which is that ineffable from which all really springs. It's hard to define, but you know what we're talking about.
And on a conflict layer, just the level of spiritual anchoring and direction that we all have in a particular moment really influences how we relate to everything else and ourselves.
All right. So those are our 8 nested layers of human connection, right? And we use this map to really start to understand the source of any friction that might be happening and the possibilities that are emerging within it. Because conflict can show up on all of these different dimensions all at once, right? And more often than not, that's what's happening. These dimensions are all happening at the same time. And then the dimensions themselves and the conflict itself on those dimensions are often created. They create on the other dimensions and they're created by the other dimensions. So there's just a lot going on. And so then seeing these layers and possibilities also helps us think about what shifts are necessary, right? So sometimes we need to shift a relationship on that interpersonal level in order to open up the possibility of shifting things on the organizational level. Or sometimes we need to shift an organizational dynamic in order to create an environment for someone to actually be able to make a shift on their personal level. And then if we zoom out farther, we can notice that in order to address some of the biggest system and ideological conflicts that we have, we're actually going to need to be able to address some of our most intimate personal, interpersonal, and organizational conflicts in order to be able to actually intervene at those larger scales.
I feel like that's a reason why we should talk about conflict resilience as part of an overall change strategy.
Oh my gosh, Simon,
Wow,
did you just come up with that?
thought of that. Um, but yeah, on each of these different layers, there's kind of different possibilities that show up when we focus on one or another. For example, if we really focus on that personal layer and making a shift there, we're usually going to unlock possibilities of personal growth, learning, and trauma repatterning. If we focus on that interpersonal layer, we're usually going to get deepened trust, communication, understanding. On an organizational layer, we're going to end up with new structures, new policies, and new practices. And then through the systems ideological world, all in source layers, things get a little bit more complex. But just generally speaking, when we focus there, we develop a new analysis and awareness of what's going on in the world and around us that allows us to access new practices for how we relate to those levels and relate to one another.
Because there are a lot of really great like conflict work and approaches out there, like restorative justice or nonviolent communication. And these tools, really, the tools that we're talking about, help us notice that these approaches often fall into 3 different pitfalls. So, one, they only address 1 or 2 of these levels, like the personal or the interpersonal and maybe the organizational level, right? Or they don't work on the root or core dynamics that are happening. And 3, they can often subtly prioritize certain forms of resolution, which is why a conflict process might result in people feeling seen and heard, but actually still existing in a toxic organization. That can happen when we're focusing a lot on the personal and interpersonal layer, but not the organizational layer and any structures that might exist there. You might have changes in roles and policies, but continued distrust. That can often happen when we focus too much on that organizational level and shifting our agreements, but not really attending to the personal or interpersonal or people or that ideological level. Then you can have shared political analysis, right? Do all the work to build that and still have no ability to actually change your circumstances. And that can often happen when we're focused on that ideological layer, where we're really trying to do political education, but we aren't empowering groups in a systems level or an organizational level to actually be able to move and shift things tangibly. And so that is why this way of seeing and our tools are really embedded throughout our whole approach, because we think it's more comprehensive and holistic and is actually more likely to get you to the top of that mountain where you can see all of the different possibilities and make a different choice and adapt and evolve your organization to keep moving forward.